Today's episode is for you if you've ever realized halfway through class that you're holding your breath, if pliés feel tense instead of elastic, or if dancing sometimes feels harder than it needs to. This episode kicks off a new, ongoing series on the 9 elements of artistry in ballet, a series we'll be returning to throughout 2026, exploring one element at a time every few weeks. We're starting with breath because breath affects everything: technique, musicality, transitions, stamina, and how movement feels in our bodies. I'm joined by a returning and beloved guest, Chelsea Weidmann, also known as the Geeky Ballerina. Chelsea's master's research focused on breaking artistry down into practical, teachable elements, especially for adult dancers. And breath is both one of the most foundational and most overlooked of these 9 elements. In this conversation, we get specific. We talk about how to use breath in plie, when it's helpful to breathe in versus out, why so many dancers unintentionally hold their breath, and how changing your breath can change your dancing without even changing the steps. If you've ever been told to just breathe, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Chelsea, thank you so much for joining me again. You have been a recurring guest and a fan favorite, so thank you for being here.
Thank you. I love being here. This is so fun.
I know, I love our chats, and I am so thankful that you are going to be doing this series with us because in previous episodes that you've been on, you have been so gracious to condense the full breadth of your work into one episode. But I think doing a deep dive for each element is really the best way to do justice to your work. So I'm really excited for this. So we're going to start today with breath, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. So I know when I had asked you, what do you prefer to start with for this series? And you had said breath. So can you maybe even just talk about why, if we're going to be working through these elements systematically, why breath is the best one to kind of start with?
Yes. So I should clarify, breath is the place I prefer to start with adult dancers. If we were talking about teaching children, it would be different. But it's great for adult dancers because it's really easy to access, right? Like everybody knows how to slow their breathing, speed up their breathing, blow out a birthday candle. You don't have to be good at a tendu before you can start making choices about your breath. So it's really, really accessible. And it has this added bonus of helping us release excess unnecessary tension throughout our body, which just helps everything else we're trying to do become more easy. Well, easy is the wrong word. Easier or easeful or ease adjacent, but it makes it a little bit easier. So that's why I like to start there with adults. We get a lot of bang for our buck.
Yeah, and I think breath is one of those things too. If you've been taking class for any length of time, you've probably heard the teacher say, whether to you specifically or just to the whole room, don't forget to breathe, don't forget to breathe, remember to breathe. And so I was wondering if you could kind of dive into that a little bit more, the role of breath in actual technique and like why it is so important to be breathing through our movement.
This is going to sound totally facetious, but the most important reason is because if we don't breathe, we literally expire. You'll pass out, and then I have a lot of paperwork to do, and it's just not worth it. So that's the most important reason. But when we are able to connect our breath to our movement, people who are familiar with yoga practices also have a really good understanding of this. It helps us to relax into the movement, which always, always, always makes ballet more successful and more enjoyable. And then there are also some specific things we can do with breath to sometimes help with technique. So, for example, if you need to engage your core for something in particular, an exhale will do that for you. So if you are finding that you're having trouble keeping your core engaged on your grand battement, try exhaling as the leg goes up. The same thing would be true for a big jump. This is not a hard and fast rule. In fact, there are only 2 rules in breathing. And can we jump to those right now, please?
Yes, please do it.
Okay. The only 2 rules about breathing is that it needs to be rhythmic and regular. And then it's very personal. Everybody's lung capacity is different. Everybody's preferences are different. Exhaling on a grand jeté is going to help one person feel very, very supported in their core. It will help a different person feel heavy. So there's a lot of room for experimentation. You just need to keep doing it, and you need to trust yourself.
Yeah, but I think that's interesting though with like breathing out, because I think as kids, a lot of times, like when we think of engaging, we think of like inhaling and holding our breath. And so it's interesting because thinking of breathing out instead, and I know you said it's personal, can feel different for for different people, but I think even just trying it, because that's probably a tendency a lot of us have, is to do the like inhale hold
Yeah.
versus pushing out, which does give you that really nice engaged feeling. So I feel like that's like such a great takeaway just immediately, is thinking of doing that versus what we all kind of tend to do.
And well, it doesn't help that we're always like up, 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 up. And at some point you're like, I've run out of vertebrae. We're into the shoulders now.
Totally. Yeah, so how this is something I always find interesting, is like it's one of those nuances that I think separates more so like a beginner from someone who's more seasoned and has that look that we all love, where dance feels a little bit more effortless. So I'm wondering if you can talk about how you can look technically correct, but still like appear tense, because I think that's probably very connected to breath also.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And it's very often because we're not taking full, complete breaths. It's really interesting. People never, ever forget to inhale, but we often forget to exhale or exhale fully. And so it just, the pressure builds and builds, and eventually it reads as tense. So that's one reason, is we're not in the habit of exhaling as fully as we could be. And then another reason is because um, it's so difficult to teach alignment in ballet. And so a lot of times people will like engage their abs and like stitch the ribs together, and then you can't move the rib cage. And that's your primary, like the diaphragm moving, which makes the belly move outward, is the primary, most efficient way to breathe. That also involves the rib cage moving a little bit. And so if we lock all that down in the name of core control and alignment, the only respiratory muscles we have left are the secondary and sometimes tertiary muscles. And so we get this idea that like, oh, ballerinas wear corsets and they never move their abdomen. And then we have to breathe way up here because we've locked down all of our other options. And that reads as tense because it is tense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I also wonder too, like as you were talking about the diaphragm moving, I wonder if some of that even comes in if early on, especially, you were trained somewhere where there was not great body positivity and you always felt like you were trying to be the skinniest version of yourself in class. I think some of that holding in the wrong ways and almost being afraid to allow your diaphragm to move, trying to like maintain this, quote unquote skinny look. We've all heard of like teachers saying things like, I can see your lunch, or things like that, It's
Yeah.
like some of that stuff, I'm sure it has an impact on breathing, especially if you dance when you were younger in a studio environment like that.
Yeah. Well, and there's a misunderstanding. Like we think of like our abs, abdominal area, basically like bottom of the ribs to the hip bones, as like one thing, when it's actually really complex and complicated. Like your diaphragm comes up underneath your rib cage and it almost makes like a little M, and it's not a core stabilizer. And then we go below the belly button, and that's where you get into many more of your core stabilizers. So you can have the core engagement below the belly button and still release in the diaphragm so that you can breathe. So instead of thinking, oh, my whole belly is going to go like this, it almost is more like that,
Yeah.
because we're releasing where we need to be released and we're supporting where we need to support. And that takes time to find, but it also takes permission to let yourself take up 3 dimensions of space. I have about 3 students right now who I am just reinforcing to them, we are not supposed to be flat in the front. You are not supposed to be flat from hip bone to hip bone.
Yeah.
We just don't.
Yeah, and it's hard because I think sometimes like looking at ourselves in the mirror, I was doing this in class yesterday. I had this really weird moment where I was like, I would look in the mirror at myself and then, and everyone around me, and then you'd turn and see other people in real time. And it's like our bodies are so different in three-dimensional space than they are in the mirror. Obviously, as dancers, we need the mirror for the feedback, but it also does really weird things
visually to us, and we start to conceptualize ourselves, I think, as flat, which is not accurate to real life.
Yeah. And it's not healthy or fun.
Yeah, no, definitely not. So maybe we could talk about plie, because since plie is such a foundational part of ballet training, all the things that follow in center work, I would love to talk about how this element of breath connects to plie and bending and straightening, and how adult dancers can be thinking about their breath from the very first exercise of the bar.
I love this. This is the perfect place to start. You're such a good host. So the first thing to mention is that you can't coordinate your breath with every plie. That is no longer a rhythm that is personal to you, especially if you're in petit allegro. Like So we are selective. Some of the plies we are intentional with our breath on, and some of them we are not. And then at the beginning of bar, it's easier because they are slower plies, and that's all we're doing. But this is great because there are actually two main principles for breath. And one of them is that you exhale to engage the core, which we covered. And the other one is that very often dancers find it helpful to inhale as the shape gets bigger and exhale as the shape gets smaller. This is a great place to play with the idea of inhaling as the shape gets bigger, because it depends on how the dancer defines bigger. So here we are, right? Our legs are straight. If you want to think of bigger as horizontal, you're going to inhale as you go down because we're taking up more horizontal space, and then you'll exhale as you come up. If you want to think of bigger as vertical, you're going to exhale going down and inhale going up.
Yeah.
Neither one is right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it's like it is just the difference of how you interpret length and expansion.
Yeah. And there's the only way to find out is to play around with it. I would probably play around with it like at home before you got into the studio, just because it's really different to switch your breathing in the middle of a combination, or to remember to switch between the right side and the left side, because by then you've already gotten a different kind of feedback. So if you decide this is what I'm doing today, and then your next class you can try the other one, that tends to be a really manageable cognitive load, as opposed to I'm going to experiment with my breath a different way on every plie.
This is such a great at-home experiment that you can do, because even if you don't have a ballet bar at home, you can put your hand on your kitchen counter and experiment with breath in your plies.
Or the wall.
Yeah, and I think breath is such a form of regulation, even like emotional regulation. Like, I think sometimes that's why it's so funny how so many adults I talk to are like, plies are the best part of class. And I think it's because there is, like you mentioned, the breathing aspect is a little bit easier to access in the very first plie exercise. Even though you're doing more plies throughout class, they get a little faster. So it's not as meditative almost as usually the first exercise is. And so I think there's something that's so powerful in the breath aspect of plies. So maybe now we could talk about breath and how that plays into musicality.
So musicality kind of divides into two types. And in my experience, it's like a 70-30 situation. So I'm going to validate the 30% first. About 30% of dancers relate to musicality most naturally through math and structure. And they often feel like they are the only one in the world and that there's something wrong with them. Y'all are geniuses. And the rest of us are going to ask you, like, I know which of my students those are, because those are the ones where I'm like, hang on, how many are there? And they're like, this is how many rows we should have. And they just already know. I'm like, love it. So I am validating the mathematical people, and I'm going to talk more about the 70%, which relates to music more emotionally first. All people can learn both ways. But when we're talking about musicality, I love woodwind instruments for this particularly, because literally the musician's breath creates the music. And so if you listen to a recording or a live performance of flute, bassoon, oboe, even the brass instruments like trumpet, saxophone, you can hear the inhalation and the exhalation and how that impacts the music. And then as a dancer, you can start experimenting with syncing up your breath with your musician's breath and see what that does. If you have a really high quality recording of a violin solo, you can hear those inhalations too.
Yeah, it's so cool. I'm so glad you brought this up because I just around Christmas, I went to see a Christmas concert at a local church and they had a live orchestra. And I was thinking while I was having all these internal thoughts, like, am I so fascinated by this because I'm a dancer? And I think partially the answer is yes. But I loved watching them breathing as they were playing because even like you said, even the violinist like, played so passionately and beautifully. And I loved watching the way his body and his breath were moving in coordination with what he was playing. It was just so similar, I think, to a dancer or like how we would want to be inhabiting the music in that way, you know? And so I love that you brought this up because I think that a lot of the dancers that I really admire, like even someone like Tyler Peck, I know she talks a lot about just being a student of music and really listening to the music that she's dancing to and finding those places where you can change the quality of your movement to match what's happening. And so I love that you're talking about this in connection with breath because I think it's something that if you watch live music, especially, or even YouTube, like pulling up, watching an orchestra play, seeing how they're breathing and moving their bodies, it's such an interesting study in I think we can translate it into our dancing.
Yeah, because both of us are taking breath and movement and making art.
Yeah. Another thing I would love to hear what you think about this is breathing in regards to balance, because I think this is a huge, huge one where there's a temptation to hold our breath when we're trying to like hold. And so we stop breathing. So, can we talk a little bit about breathing as it pertains to balance?
Yeah. Okay. Apparently, I'm the queen of anecdotes. I promise this relates. But the most valuable lesson I ever learned about balance happened. It was my first ballet class back after I had my first child, after I had my daughter. And the woman teaching also had kids. And I was all of the things that you are after you have a child. And I was like, how do you keep your life balanced? And as she rolled her eyes, she's like, oh my gosh, it's never in balance. It's always in flux. And that's really what balance is, including when you're standing on point and you're just there for 39 counts or whatever. 39 is the most random number. But internally, there's always movement. Things are always in flux. And we talk about like finding your aplomb and we talk about the micro adjustments that are happening in your feet and your ankles. But even beyond that, you need your blood to keep circulating. You need your heart to keep pumping. You need your lungs to keep moving. Balance is not a thing we achieve. Balance is just prioritizing where we need to be prioritizing in a moment. And the same thing is true in class. If you hold your breath, you're chasing an illusion. In terms of breath as a functional tool to help with your balance, it's going to relate to how you like to breathe when you pirouette. So we're going to cover both at the same time. Most people have a preference. There's a slight amount of people that are like, everything works for me. And I'm like, oh, that's why you just did 16 pirouettes in your third class. Good job. But about 49% of the world turns and balances better when they exhale on the turn. It helps them to ground. So if you find that you hop a lot in your turns, try exhaling in your pirouettes. Yeah. Because everything in ballet is up. And then eventually you actually kind of start coming off the rhythm. So exhaling helps us to go down the spine, down that line and through the inner leg, down into the ground. The exhale helps us get there. And then about 49% of the world does better when they inhale on the pirouette because it gives them a sense of buoyancy.
Okay.
So when you know how you prefer to breathe through your pirouettes, that is also probably the breath focus that is going to support your balance the best. Obviously, we're not going to only do one. If you have a 16 count balance, you probably aren't going to exhale for 16 counts. You're going to let the part of the breath you don't need to think about happen. You're going to welcome it into your world. And then you're going to really enjoy the part of the breath that is supporting you.
I'm definitely going to try that this week because I know I tend to hold my inhale when I'm balancing. But I'm also someone who hops a lot in my pirouettes, which means that I should probably be doing the opposite, it sounds like, and think about breathing out to balance. I had a teacher a few weeks ago say that during pirouettes, I should think about drilling my foot into the ground. Like as you're turning, you're kind of, corkscrewing down into the ground. And my gosh, if that wasn't an instant game changer for me. But I think it's like you said, it's a lot of times we're thinking so up, 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 up in ballet that you almost don't realize that you can go too far with that. And there is a groundedness that we still need to have, and that tension between up and down, that's like where the magic lives, but it's really hard to find the balance between the both. So yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to try exhaling on my balances this week. So maybe we could talk about transitions, because I think when we're, more in the beginner stages of our journey, we're thinking about, especially if we're in a class that's a little bit stressful, we're thinking about like, oh God, what's the next big movement that I need to do and not mess up so that all eyes don't go to me in a class. But it's really those linking steps, those moments of transition that I think give the professional dancer such like a beautiful polished look. So how should we be thinking about breath in transitions, not just the big steps?
I feel so bad. I am giving no straight answers, but there are usually two ways to think about this, which I guess works with the duality of inhale and exhale. So I'm still on brand. You can either think, what breath did I just do? And what is the natural response to that? So if you just exhaled on your pirouettes and you're about to glisse into something, make sure you let the inhalation happen. Or you can think, especially if the thing you're about to do is the thing that takes a lot of power or you're not confident in yet, your connecting step, if you know how you want to breathe in point B, your connecting step is you set up for that. So if I know I want to inhale on my grand jeté, I therefore have to exhale on the glissade before it.
Yep.
But don't plan every step. You'll make yourself crazy and it doesn't feel good. So you have to pick the most important parts, which comes back to artistry, because you get to decide as the dance artist, what vocabulary in this combination do you want to draw your audience's attention to? And then all of your elements of artistry, musicality, eyeline, breath, they all converge on that point. So if I want the pirouette to be the thing my audience notices, that's where I'm going to make sure I use my breath the way that is best for me, which means the preparation before is going to be its balancing thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Do you have a strategy for like when you're taking class or dancing, how you choose your moments? Like, is that something that you think about when you're marking, like when the combination is being given? Or is that something that you don't think about until you're actually doing the exercise? Like, I would just love to hear how you work through this as a dancer.
I never do it in the moment because I am busy not following. Yeah. So especially when I teach students, I will give the combination and then I will give them about an extra minute, minute and a half to think through that decision and mark it. And you only think about the breath in that moment and the connecting step before it. Let them mark it a couple of times and then we do it, because it takes practice to be able to do this. And that's what rehearsal, like professionals can't do it either. That's why they rehearse.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think that this is one of those aspects of ballet that's really challenging if, for most adults, like we're only doing class, we're not getting performance opportunities. And I haven't really done any major performing with ballet. And so the only thing I can compare it to is when I used to do salsa performances. And one of the things that I love about preparing for a show is you do get so much more time to work on nuance, like how do I want to breathe? Whereas in class, a lot of times it's like, here's the combination, we're going to do it once, get some corrections, do it a second time, moving on. And I think as adults, a lot of times we get frustrated with ourselves, but it's not about us. It's not anything we're doing wrong. It's just the way that class is structured is not really built for this kind of nuance that I think we would all love. And it's what you get when you perform. But for so many adults, there's not those opportunities. So I think it's a really common frustration, like in the ballet class, is like there's just never enough time to learn all this stuff, and it's so hard. But I think that's why home practice is also great.
Well, one of the reasons I love talking to you is because I always come out with things that I can do better in my teaching. And what I am realizing is that the next time I do get to teach an adult class, I want to have an exercise for 4 to 6 weeks that we do every single time. But I also need, as the teacher, I need to be saying out loud to my students, we are repeating this not because you're getting it wrong, not because I don't want you to have new challenges, but because I want you to have time to experiment with artistry and refining things. I know a lot of teachers worry that adult students will get bored and then leave, and then we don't have a job. And so there's an interesting tension there, but this is definitely something that as teachers, we could be doing better, because as soon as you explain to someone, whether it's a 9-year-old or a 19-year-old or a 29-year-old, we are repeating this because it was good on the inside. And now, like an everlasting gobstopper, let's get good on the next level.
Yeah.
All the way down. And I'm going to give you 6 weeks to see how many layers we get into. Everybody can understand that concept.
Oh, totally. And it's funny because like I've also heard that too of, teachers being afraid that it's going to be boring, but I'm like, man, I think most of us as adults are just like, slow down. I want more time. And I had one teacher who did set combinations for the month, and no one ever complained about it. And I think it's because everyone was like, oh, thank God. By, maybe week 3, you're not really thinking as much about the choreography. You're just enjoying the music, and you're thinking more about breath and these other elements of artistry that we'll cover in future episodes. And it's so fun to get to that point. And I think it's a point that adult dancers oftentimes don't get to reach in a normal class setting, because we're just trying to stay on the counts and on the choreography. So I'm like, adult teachers, please do set combinations for... I'm like anywhere from like 4 to 8 weeks. I could do set combinations for 2 months and then not complain about it at all, because I think there's just always something to work on. So to close out, I was wondering if adults want to start implementing some things this coming week. Could you maybe give us 1 or 2 practices for the barre and maybe 1 or 2 practices for the center that we could all be trying this week in class?
Plies. Decide how you want to conceptualize getting bigger in your plie. So there's 2 ways to use breath. Inhale when you get bigger, exhale when you get smaller, exhale when you want to engage your core or relax. So use plies to decide what part of that is the bigger shape for you. And it's not an intellectual thing. Try it both ways and do the one that feels better. And then tendus is the next one. Tendu actually does get bigger as it goes out, right? And if we initiate the tendu with the inhalation, that will carry into dégagé and rond de jambe and grand battement and all of those. So those are the 2 that I would do at the barre.
Okay.
In the center, can I have 3 in the center?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Sure. Player's choice.
In the center, I would say play around with your adagio, and any teachers listening, give a very short adagio so that you can do it twice and then feedback and then twice again. Keep it short. Because either on those big développés, or, sometimes they're 45 degrees, but they're big développés. They are hard. We are turning out.
Big. No matter how high they are, they always feel too high.
You get it. I love it. Either exhaling as the leg goes up will help you because it engages your core, or inhaling as the leg goes up will help you because the imagery of getting bigger is helpful to you. So play with those and find out what works for you. Really, this could all be summed up and find out what works for you, but that's okay. The next one I would do is the pirouette. Same thing. If you're not sure if you're going to be an inhale as you go around or an exhale as you go around, try it both ways. See if you can do the combination twice, both sides, so that you know. And then my fun bonus 3rd one is petit allegro. Okay, this made the biggest difference. It's called the magic word. And I learned it from my teacher. I was in junior high. Her name is Marsha Russell. She's great. She told us we needed a magic word for our petit allegros. All of the stuff that burns, especially when you're just doing like 98 sautés in first or whatever. Your magic word needs to be one syllable and it needs to be kind of silly. Poof, fluff, spring, la, whatever. What do I use? I use puff. And you think of your magic word at the top of your jump, and it helps you feel lighter, which I guess maybe doesn't have anything to do with breathing, except that if you were to say it out loud, you'd be exhaling. I lied. It has nothing to do with breathing. It just helps with jumps.
No, I love that though, because I chronically struggle with petit allegro. So I'm like, I will take a petit allegro tip any time of day or night. Doesn't matter if it's related.
I have another one.
Topic. Please.
Okay, you can edit this out if you want this just for Hannah. But another one that really helps, especially for people who struggle to really point their feet in their petit allegro, gorgeous tendus, gorgeous dégagés, and then in jumps you're like, it's there. I don't know where. Okay, so if you think of a mold, like I always think of a Han Solo in carbonite, right? Even this perfect mold of your body. There's a mold of the shape, and all you have to do is jump into it.
Oh, I love that. Like freeze frame.
Yeah, the mold will point your feet for you. All you have to do is jump into it.
Yeah, I think visuals are so helpful for ballet because, yeah, if you can latch onto a visual, it's so much easier than trying to do like a full mental checklist of the more technical way of arriving at that point because it's happening in a split second. So thinking like hit the mold versus thinking point your feet, engage your glutes.
Well, that's how your body works. Like you don't think, oh, I want to pick up a cupcake. Okay, so I need to contract something there. And then I need to use my triceps to extend my elbow. And then I'm going to use all the, like you don't think that. You think, ooh, cupcake. Jumps are the same way.
Yeah. It's like I think working with the way our brains work instead of against the way our brains work is always a benefit. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for being with us today and taking us on this deep dive of breath work. Can you tell everyone how they can connect with you, follow you, because you are constantly putting out great resources, and I would love for my listeners to be able to find you and keep receiving all this great information.
Oh, thank you. So I am Geeky Ballerina. Geek is a weird word to say, but it works. So that's my website, geekyballerina.com. I'm vaguely active on socials, same thing. That's not my preferred channel. Actually, what I love the most is writing my newsletter. I love to write it.
It's so good. I tell people at your newsletter all the time. It's like a little magical ballet thing that just gets dropped into your inbox, and it always has great information. And I'm always like, oh, I'm going to do that in class this week.
Oh, I'm so glad because I have so much, it is so joyful for me to write it. I have so much fun getting to write it. And I'm always like, I hope this helps someone. I hope this is not the most narcissistic thing I've ever done.
No. It's funny like the things we tell ourselves, right? When we start in like a form of content creation. I have that thought all the time when I'm doing blogs or newsletters and stuff. I'm like, is this meant to be helpful? I hope it's helpful.
Sometimes I'm like, hey, my own joy matters.
Yeah, yes. And yes, fair. I think that is such a powerful, this is totally jumping topics, but I think it's such a powerful way to frame looking at your work of like, would I do this if it was only for me? And the answer is yes. I think you're on the right track.
Yeah. And the same thing is true for going to a ballet class, like, especially when the world around us gets very heavy and we think this is so superficial. It actually isn't, because you matter and your joy matters. And the only way we get to a beautiful, wonderful world is with nourished people in it. And so it's so easy, again, going back to your work, it's so easy to think, all I do is tell children to point their feet and that I don't care. Like that doesn't make the world better. But then when I take a step back, which is usually my husband pulling me backwards, the reality is we have fun in class. And I get to teach children that they can do hard things and meet goals. And there is something to be said for doing something because you love it. It's not worth less.
Yeah.
I think we all need that reminder. And then I'm going to just radically shift back. For people who are interested specifically in breath, I do talk about it in my book, Artistry Inside Ballet Technique, Volume 1. Volume 2 is coming so slowly. But breath gets 4 chapters, and it has a lot of specific things you can try in class, and that's available on Amazon.
Yes, and I will link everything in the show notes so that people can find you, find your book, and you are going to be back soon.
Yes.
And keep going through. We have 9 elements, right? 9. Okay.
9.
We have 9 elements, so this is the first of 9, and we're just going to kind of scatter them throughout the rest of the year, the next several months. We'll just have some episodes. Chelsea has graciously offered to go on this adventure with me, which I'm so excited.
It's self-serving. This is fun for me. So I love that you call it gracious, but it actually is, I'm like, yeah.
It's so fun. I love when I have guests on that also love the podcasting experience because it just makes it so fun. So I'm so glad that we get to do more episodes in the future. So make sure you stay tuned. And thank you guys so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for listening. If this episode was helpful or encouraging, I'd love for you to share it with a friend or leave a quick review. It's one of the best ways to help more adult dancers find this podcast and feel a little less alone in their ballet journey. All the links and resources mentioned today are waiting for you in the show notes. I'll meet you back here next week after class.